Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I am fresh off the plane from New York, and let me tell you, your boy is tired. Thanks to an extremely aggressive embargo, New York definitely earned that city that never sleeps nickname on this trip. But that's not going to stop me from sharing everything that I saw while I attended Nintendo's first ever hands-on session for Nintendo Switch 2. That is right, I spent an entire day playing Switch 2 and several of its games, and I'm going to sit here by myself and chop up everything that came out of this past Wednesday, including the Nintendo Direct news. And as I just mentioned, because this is such a jam-packed episode and I wanted to get it out to you all ASAP, it is just going to be me today, and here's how it's going to work. First, I am going to run down all of the news out of the Nintendo Direct. Then from there on out, the All Things Nintendo community is actually going to play a pretty big part in this episode. So I guess you're going to kind of be my honorary guests. I'm not only going to get some reactions from the ATN patrons, but also at the tail end, I'm going to do my best to answer any questions that came in today while I was on the plane flying back to Minnesota. So, you know, as you were well aware, there were over 60 minutes of announcements from the Nintendo Direct that hit this past Wednesday, the long-awaited Switch 2 Nintendo Direct. And, you know, we're going to talk all about that stuff here. You know, I'm basically just going to be ranting by myself. So it's going to be, I'm not going to go quite as long as Cory Booker did, filibustering for 25 hours. But while I'm recording it, it might feel like I am rambling just as much as that. So apologies if, I go off course at all during this episode. I'm going to do my best to stay focused and stay moving forward here because there is a lot to cover. But, you know, before we jump in, I do want to just say that, like, you know, thank you to everybody who was active on either the Patreon page or the community Discord during this week. It has been a lot of fun keeping up with everybody's reactions, questions. I was attending an event while the Direct was happening, so I wasn't able to kind of be in there and live post with everybody and react on the Discord, but it was so much fun to go back and see everybody's reactions while things were happening. I could pinpoint exact moments that people were reacting to in the Discord, and then of course all of the reactions that we will get to later on in the show from both the Discord and the Patreon, and then a few other sources as well. But let's jump right into it, shall we? So it started off, and I think it's pretty obvious that we were going to start with this game. It was a new Mario Kart game that they showed during that first Nintendo Switch 2 reveal. And we finally have a title and a lot of details. I think this was the biggest deep dive they did aside from the system itself. And that is Mario Kart World. So I wrote this in my preview on GameInformer.com, which you can go read right now alongside a few other previews, including my full hands-on of the Switch 2 itself. But we're also going to get into that on this episode. So you can watch on our YouTube channel. There's footage I shot of the Switch 2 event, and, you know, read it on GameInformer.com or just listen to it right where you're listening to this right now. So all kinds of ways you can get my full impressions. But Mario Kart World, the thing that I was saying about the next Mario Kart, both on this podcast and in my Mario Kart World preview on GameInformer.com, is that I have constantly been questioning where Nintendo can go from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with that franchise. You know, they kind of threw everything in that one package, especially once the Booster Course Pass came out with all those expansions and doubling the number of courses on offer. And how would they continue that without feeling like a step back or just feeling like, oh, this is the same thing as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe but not as good? And they think they've found the answer, and I'll get into whether or not I agree with that when we get to the hands-on session discussion on the main segment of this episode. But Mario Kart World, they basically are giving us almost an open world Mario Kart. It's kind of wild to think, but like the courses there. I mean, don't be confused. There are actual defined race courses in Mario Kart World, but it's a Switch 2 exclusive. It takes advantage of the power that the Switch 2 brings, and it has 24 racers per race, which is a lot. And then there's different mechanics they showed off. There's like the ability to grind on rails. There's the wall riding. There's like racing on water, and the Grand Prix. They said that you start off and you do your race, and then part of the event is driving to the next course, which is such a cool idea. And then they also showed off knockout tour mode, which it has the kind of like the elimination convention that you've seen in other racing games, where it has the 24 racers, and then it'll say like you'll go through a course, and like you have to be in a certain spot in order to not get eliminated. So you'll go through, and if you're above the 18th spot, I think it was the first elimination, you can continue. If you're below, if or below it, better than that, sorry, it's racing nomenclature. So if you're better than the 18th position, you are eliminated, or you're still going, and everybody else is eliminated, and then the number drops the next checkpoint. So that's a really cool thing to add into Mario Kart as well, especially with the increased player count. And then there's the free roam ability, or free roam mode, and what that is just basically it sets you in this giant open area and lets you explore. You can drive on the courses if you want. You can drive from one course to another. You could just drive from one side of the map to another, from what I understand. So there's a lot that you can do there. You can meet up with friends in free roam mode, take pictures, and yeah, there's just a lot going on. There's costumes, which you can transform in the middle of the race. We see in the trailer that like Mario grabs, I think it's a burger, and he scarfs it down, and there's costumes that you can transform into from those, or you can just select them from right off the bat. Not quite sure what those do. And then there's also weather effects and time of day, which can change how a course plays out. So there's so much at play here, and it is going to be a Switch 2 exclusive, and we'll get into my hands-on impressions a little bit later. But there's going to be an April 17th Nintendo Direct all about Mario Kart World, so we're going to chop that up right on this show when that time comes. We'll know a lot more in a couple of weeks. And what we did get, though, is that Mario Kart World is a launch title for the Switch 2. And let's not beat around the bush. The announcement that they gave us later on in the episode, but it would feel weird in a podcast to not say this right off the bat. The Switch 2 is coming out June 5th. So, my prediction was June 20th. I said $400, and I was wrong on both, but I think I was, in the ballpark with both those predictions. And yeah, it's launching the Mario Kart World launches alongside the Switch 2. So, yeah, that'll undoubtedly be a major seller, similar to how Breath of the Wild was when the Switch 1 came out, which brings us to the next segment, Nintendo Switch 2. So I'm just going to refer to some notes here to try and cover all of this. I have my notebook that I was writing furiously during the Direct. So the first thing that we see, aside from the form factor, it was the producer, the lead technical director, and the director of Switch 2 were showing off the different features. And we finally learned what the C button does, and it turns out it is for a thing called Game Chat, which, when I saw this, I was like, okay, so they have basically added a functionality that has been native to Xbox 360 or native to Xbox and PlayStation since the 360 PS3 era, the ability to chat with people in games. And I was like, great, well done, Nintendo. You're finally caught up to 2008. And there are some cool features that they do add to that. So you press the C button and it can access game chat. You can invite your friends to join your session. It looks like it's up to 4 people total can be in one game chat session, and it allows you to have different like you can have different setups, right? Like, so you can be off camera and it's just like your Switch profile avatar thing. You can also make it so, like, if you have the Nintendo Switch camera that they showed off on this direct as well, you can have it so it's just like a video feed. Of if you're watching on YouTube, it would look just like this. Or you can superimpose your camera feed over the game that you are playing and basically live stream your gameplay and what you are currently looking like to everybody in the game chat session. And that is a really cool idea. And I imagine there's got to be like a Twitch app that is going to come, because it looks just like when people stream their games on Twitch, right? Like there's the gameplay, and then they are superimposed over the gameplay, and it removes the background. And the Switch 2 camera not only removes the background, but it also, the microphone that is built into the Switch console itself can also drown out other sounds. And in a roundtable that I attended with the producer, director, and technical design lead, they talked about how it's not just like drowning out background sounds, it targets specific sounds. So if, like, they showed in the trailer for the camera and game chat that like it drowns out, like they showed like a roommate blending something like right next to the person who's playing, it should drown out that. I mean, I don't know how the person who's talking is going to hear, but they also said it would drown out like a vacuum cleaner that's being run in like a nearby room. But it's not going to drown out clapping, and that is because it uses clapping as some mechanics in certain games. So that's really innovative, and basically you can receive an invitation to join game chat and then jump right in there. And I actually have to say, I do appreciate that they didn't make it seem like it's better than it actually is. I mean, maybe it is pretty. I don't know. I haven't gotten my hands on game chat, but I appreciated that in the direct it showed like this thing is going to be going kind of choppy, right? They didn't just superimpose gameplay and be like, okay, yeah, it's going to be perfect. They actually showed it a little like not perfect in how it streams, kind of similar to like when you watch somebody play a game over Discord. It almost reminds me of that. So, yeah, I mean, let me see if there's anything else in my notes here, but it's going to be available at launch, and the uh, game chat is only going to be available to people who have Nintendo Switch Online subscriptions, except for at the start of the Switch 2's life cycle. It is going to be available to everybody temporarily. And then also, the camera can be used in certain games as well. And the example they showed is Mario Party, or Super Mario Party Jamboree, which we'll get into a little bit later. So the next thing that they talked about are game cards, and it didn't really have much to say about this. They didn't get into like how it tastes compared to the Nintendo Switch One game cards, but it looks like it's a different color, and it looks like the technology has improved, and it's faster reading and writing speeds. Um, and there's also the micro SD XC Express cards, which they are, I guess, ditching the type of game storage things that they added in the for Switch One. Now you have to use a micro SD Express, which allows for faster reading and writing of data. So presumably to try to reduce loading times. Also, one thing they did mention is that the Switch 2 also has 256 gigabytes of storage, which sounds like an SSD denomination to me. They did say it's faster than the Switch 1 at reading and writing data, so I don't know if that means it's an SSD. They never specifically said SSD as far as I remember. Um, there's also a new stand on the Switch 2 which I played around with it a little bit, and it does feel very sturdy, and it's also extremely adjustable. USB-C at the top and the bottom. One thing to note is that they did clarify during a Q&A that I attended that it's the only USB-C port that exports video is the bottom one. So the one that would actually make contact with the dock when you slide it in. And then in handheld mode, it is 1080p and up to 120 frames per second, which is incredible. And then double the amount of pixels as the Switch One. It is an LCD and not an OLED, which I think people were kind of worried about that they were going to do that. But that said, it they were pretty confident in that. They asked about that, and they basically were like, "Hey, there's been a lot of advancements in LCD technology, and we kicked around the idea of going to OLED, but ultimately we decided that like, this LCD is the best way forward." And I mean, it also has HDR support, which is going to do wonders for making it just much more vibrant, or making the blacks blacker or the whites brighter. And yeah, I mean, HDR is a huge, I think HDR is actually more impactful for how I see a game and think it looks great when compared to, like, if somebody's like, oh, this game doesn't have 4K but it has HDR, I'm usually like, okay, that's good enough. So in handheld, it does that. The Joy-Cons, as we know, were magnetic, and then there's also the button on the back that you can detach and reattach it. It did actually take a little bit of a learning curve for me, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The Joy-Cons are larger, the joysticks are larger, and then there are motion controls, obviously. You can also do the controller in mouse mode, so you can turn it on its side and then use it like a mouse. So that also is available to all developers. And then once it is in the docked position, it can output to the TV in 4K, and again, up to 120 frames per second. And the dock has a built-in fan. It also appeared to me that it had a built-in Ethernet port, which is very much a welcomed addition. I know they added that for the OLED model of Switch 1. I am so happy that it seems that the base model of the Switch 2 also has that Ethernet port. And it will have backward compatibility, both physical and digital. I looked at the Nintendo.com kind of, like, they have like a chart of like the games that are and are not backwards compatible, and it looks like 99.5% of Nintendo published games have been tested and they work just fine. There's like a very tiny sliver of games that say not compatible, and I asked them what that was about, and they basically were like, Labo. They're like, anything with Labo, because you have to put the Switch in the Labo like cutout, and they were like, the Switch 2, because it's bigger, just it doesn't fit in the Labo. And I was like, all right, that's good to know. And then meanwhile, in the third party chart, it had like probably like 10% have been tested and work great. Then like probably like 85% is like, it starts up and looks good, but we still need to do further testing to fully confirm. And then there's like 5% that's like, we need to do more testing, maybe even less than 5%. It's a pretty small sliver of yellow in that chart, which means like it needs to do more testing. So yeah, it's, I think that's a pretty good rundown of what the Switch 2 is. But they did a thing called that, was a little concerning for me, which is they brought up a game called the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. And this looks like the quintessential tech demo, similar to Wii Sports, similar to Astro's Playroom, where it's just like, hey, here's a thing that is going to give you the rundown of all the cool stuff your new system can do. It's even called the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. And then they say it's available as a paid piece of software. And the laughter that permeated the room that I was in when they said that that was a paid thing and not just a pack-in free game That's kind of wild to me, you know. It's unexpected, I'll say, that that game was not free. But you know, it's basically a tech demo. They have little quizzes. You're basically a little character walking along the surface of the Nintendo Switch 2, and you go around to different parts of it. You can learn about the capabilities of the Switch 2. You can take part in a bunch of mini games. You know, there's one that's like Super Mario Brothers 4K, which, you know, just gives you a super zoomed out version of Mario Brothers. There's a few other games, and it gives you just a very high level tour of what the Switch 2 can do. That said, it does seem like this software is going to be less than $10. I think I just saw like there was a conversion rate that somebody did from the Japanese price, and it was like $6.75. So it could either be $5, $6.75, or $10. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, they showed, like, you know, there's speed golf, dodging spiked balls. There's an echo demo. So different things that does. And if that seems up your alley, then, you know, $5, $10, it's not going to be the end of the world if you do want to buy that. I thought it was a little egregious to charge money for that, but here we are. Um, so next up, we got the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller. And I've got to say, this controller, I love the Nintendo Switch 1 Pro controller. This seems extremely similar. The only differences appear to be that it has the C button for game chat, and then you can also flip it over, and on the back it has two buttons that where your fingers would rest. And what those do are they you can map whatever you want to those buttons. So like for shooters, I will map like one of those will be the jump button, the other one will be the reload button, and it makes it so you don't have to take your thumbs off the stick to do those specific actions. So that's really helpful in a game like Overwatch, where, you know, you're playing as a character that can fly, and in order to fly, you have to hold down a button or glide or whatever, and that allows you to hold down that button while still directing and aiming. So it's a lot easier to aim or steer or whatever you're doing. That's actually an extremely underrated thing. I mean, I'm far from a competitive player, but I will say that that is something that is hard for me to play shooters without now. Not that I'm playing that many shooters on a Switch these days. I guess Splatoon is a great example of something that would be awesome with that. I don't know what I mean. Maybe I mean most of the stuff that you do on Splatoon are mapped to the shoulder buttons anyway. So I guess there might be some application to that. Maybe jump, but you don't really have a like great vertical in Splatoon. So I don't know what exactly you do there. But then again, Call of Duty, they've already announced that that is coming to Switch 2. So I'm surprised that actually didn't show up at this direct. So let's get into this next section here. It is, oh, by the way, it also has an audio jack, which is nice for people who like playing with headphones, especially with game chat now being a thing. Nintendo Switch 2 editions, and they basically flashed up a bunch of different games from Switch 1 that are coming to Switch 2 with enhancements. And the way it works is you can buy the game outright, or if you already own the game, you can upgrade on Switch 2 for a smaller fee. I don't know what that fee is quite yet. And maybe, again, I'm fresh off the plane. I haven't had a chance to scour the internet for every single piece of news. I wanted to get this out to you guys in a timely fashion. But I mean, I can't imagine it would be more than like $10. And the games that they ran down, Super Mario Party Jamboree, which, you know, just came out last year for Switch, and that's coming July 24th. So that has mouse, mic, and camera modes, including Bowser Live, where you have to perform on camera. And then there is the Carnival Coaster, which uses mouse controls to shoot at enemies, and then it has special mini games. And then next up, there was Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which had better resolution, better frame rate, and HDR added, which I am so excited for that. There's also a new Zelda Notes app, and this gives you maps that you can look at. It's like a second screen experience for Zelda, basically. And you can say where you want to go, and it'll GPS you to that. It'll be like turn left at this. And I don't know, I think it's a little weird that like to have like a GPS telling you where to go in a game like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. But I get it, like it seems like it might be a helpful thing for players who want to get to a specific location. You can also use the app to share Ultra Hand creations as well as items, which is fun. And they also, I got to see an extended demo of the Nintendo Switch 2 camera, and one of the applications they showed was with Tears of the Kingdom, where a guy called up his friend and was like, "Hey, I don't know where to find this shrine." And she was like, "Oh yeah, like I know this one. Like drop down into that well and then like, go up this and fight this monster and then you'll find the shrine." So that is another application that you could do with the Switch 2 camera. Is like if you're stuck and your friend has beaten it, you can show them your gameplay and they can direct you where to go, which I think will be helpful. I mean, I think it's kind of similar to what I think it was PS4 tried to do, that where you could have share play where people you'd be like, "Oh, I'm stuck on this boss," and you could relinquish control to a friend and they would actually play the game for you. I think this is maybe a step up in that, in allowing you to actually you know have somebody watch you and tell you where to go. I think that's actually really cool that that's natively built in. And I didn't mention that before, but that, since it was a Tears of the Kingdom demo that they showed, that then that this felt like a right time to bring that up, I guess. Next up, they showed Kirby and the Forgotten Land, also getting a Switch 2 upgrade. Has a new story at the end of it, I guess, and better graphics, better frame rate. And the story is a meteor hits the Forgotten Land and causes all kinds of chaos. And I didn't get a chance to play this one, but I know Kirby and the Forgotten Land is one of the better Switch 1 games. So it's really cool that they're adding essentially DLC to the first Switch 2. I don't know if the story mode is actually going to come to the Switch 1 version. I would doubt it. But actually, let me see if they say anything about that in this press release here. Okay, so mysterious meteor crashes into the world of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, revealing a new story for Kirby. He must use his abilities, including new mouthful modes, to clear a trail through uncharted territory. The upgrade pack will include this new content, which can be played in single player, local co op, as well as improved performance for the entire game. So it seems like it's only Switch 2. By the way, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are launch titles in terms of upgrades. Kirby and the Forgotten Lands upgrade comes August 28th. Then we got another look at Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. As you know, that is coming to Nintendo Switch 1. There's also a Nintendo Switch 2 version. The Nintendo Switch 2 version has two modes. One is 4K at 60 frames per second. The other one is 1080p at 120 frames per second. And there's also mouse controls where, if you are a first-person shooter fan, like you play a lot of first-person shooters, that the mouse controls and aiming are, kind of the way to go if you want hyper accurate aiming. So that's a really cool addition there. And then Pokemon Legends ZA, we know that's coming later this year. So is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. But there's going to be a Nintendo Switch 2 version, which adds better resolution and frame rate. So those are the Nintendo Switch 2 editions. There's going to be additional ones that they are bringing to to this new console with enhanced versions. I'm sure we'll learn more about those in the future. The next game they showed is a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive that uses the mouse controls, and that is Dragon Drive. And it's basically like a wheelchair basketball game. It almost reminds me of like wheelchair basketball meets Rocket League. And you hold the two Joy Cons like mouses. I never know if two computer mice are mouse. Yeah, you get it. You get what I'm saying. But you hold both of them like a mouse, and then you roll on using the two mouse controllers to move your character around. So you can even do one on to turn left and then the other one to turn right, and you can stop it by holding down the triggers. And yeah, it really reminds me of like wheelchair basketball meets Rocket League, and it's 3-on-3, and you can perform tricks because the sides are quarter pipes, like a skateboarding quarter pipe, so you can get a rolling start and then ride up and then do like a 360 or whatever and then come back down. I don't think it gives you anything in the game, just kind of tells you like, hey, you just did like a 360 or whatever. So yeah, that's Dragon Drive, and then that's coming out this summer. Then they they started the the third party section of the showcase, and they started off with a bang. Elden Ring, one of the greatest games of the last generation of video games. Some people would say one of the greatest video games of all time. I wouldn't put it on my. I mean, if you've been a long time Patreon supporter, you heard my top 50 games of all time, Elden Ring is not on it, but that's just a matter of taste. I know some people this is their favorite game of all time, and I respect this game. I love Elden Ring. I've put 40 hours into it, so it's a very good game. That is coming to Switch 2 in 2025. Hades 2 is coming to Switch 2. Very excited for that. Hades 1 is an incredible roguelike. I would say one of the greatest ever to exist. Hades 2 is off to a great start. It's still in early access on PC, but I believe they said this is coming in 2025. Let me double check that. So let's see. Later this year, it says. Okay. So that is something to look forward to there. Next up was Street Fighter 6, and that is coming on launch day. There's also a couple of Switch 2 exclusive modes. So there is Gyro Battle, which is motion controls, and then there's Calorie Contest, which I watched a couple of people play, and it was they were very sweaty when they were playing it, because basically you have to shake the controller, and the harder you shake the controller, the Joy-Con, the harder your characters punch. So they were just like, I thought that it was just somebody who, like, you see the dramatization of somebody playing a video game. They're all like moving their hands all over as they like are in ways that most people don't play video games. Most people are very stoic when they're playing games. At least they're not like shaking their controller all over the place. But in this, you have to, or else you're going to be pulling off very weak attacks. So yeah, that is coming on launch day. We're also getting 3 amiibos, I believe. What was it? Jamie, Kimberly, and Luke, I think, are the 3 Street Fighter 6 characters that they are bringing in amiibo form. Let's see. Okay, well, it's not on the press release, so I guess it doesn't exist. But yeah, they showed off amiibos for that. Then we got Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion, which is a sequel to the Switch game that came out pretty early on in the life cycle. So let's see here. I believe that is coming this year, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't write it down. Split Fiction, I did write down. That is a launch title. So that is the latest game from Hazelight. Or Hazellight. I never know how to pronounce that studio, but the team behind It Takes Two, they put out a new game a few weeks ago called Split Fiction, very much in the similar vein as It Takes Two, where it's a 2-player co-op experience or 2-player multiplayer experience. I believe there are some somewhat competitive moments in this game, but yeah, that's coming launch day. They announced that EA Sports FC and Madden NFL are coming to Switch 2. If you go to the Nintendo press site, I did notice that it does specifically say EA Sports FC 26 and Madden NFL 26, which would indicate they are this year's entries. Next up was Hogwarts Legacy. That is going to be a launch title, the Nintendo Switch 2 version of that. And it adds mouse controls. And they showed that, like, the character flying around on the broomstick and the mouse gives them better controls. So that's pretty cool. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4. They also they teased that SpongeBob, there's some sort of SpongeBob crossover, which I guess is new. I believe that comes out in July, right? Let's see here. This summer, and I think that July is the multi-platform release. So yeah, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4, a game I'm very excited for, coming this summer to Switch 2. Hitman World of Assassination, just a huge experience with that trilogy of games packed into one. and that is coming on launch day to Switch 2. And then IO Interactive, the studio that makes Hitman, also shared that their James Bond game that they are working on currently, it doesn't have a title yet, it's just called Project 007, is also going to be coming to Switch 2. We don't have any information about that game at all. This was kind of really the first video that we've seen on it, or first information we've gotten about it in a very long time. Another title that is coming is Bravely Default, which, you know, it is a game that has been kind of, I think, trapped on the 3DS, and a lot of people have been wanting it to get free from that outdated system. And it's called Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD, and it's a remaster coming to Switch 2 on launch day, and it gives you uh, 2 new mini games and dual mouse controls. So I'm curious how that works. Also, it says quality of life upgrades. Next up was Yakuza 0 Director's Cut. And then we got Tears of the Kingdoms, basically their version of Age of Calamity. It is called Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. And this is extremely exciting for me, even though I'm not a Musou guy. I've said that a couple times in recent weeks. But it's Koei Tecmo and Nintendo working together, and it tells the story of the imprisoning war, which we saw in the flashbacks of Tears of the Kingdom. So it seems like Zelda is the main character, Zelda from Tears of the Kingdom. And it looks like Rauru is also a playable character, as are the champions from that era, and you're fighting off the forces of Ganondorf. So you actually get to see this all play out. No word on if it's kind of like Age of Calamity, where it's almost kind of like a multiverse story or an alternate timeline, but it's very cool that we're going to get to explore that era a little bit more, because I think that a lot of us were a little bit upset that we didn't see more of that, and it was only told through those flashbacks. Then we got into some cool stuff here. Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion packs, GameCube library. I know this is something a lot of people have been really looking forward to, and we got a lot to talk about here with the GameCube library. So it is launching with F-Zero GX, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and Soul Calibur 2. And they also showed a pretty robust list of games. Let me see if I can bring this up real quick. So I know that one of them was Pokemon. Hold on one second here. I just want to get the actual thing here. So those are the three that they are launching with. Soul Calibur 2, which, by the way, having Link finally brought back for Soul Calibur 2, that version, is amazing. Okay, so here are the games they added when they said more titles are going to be added. Super Mario Sunshine, obviously. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Super Mario Strikers. Chibi Robo Plug into Adventure. Well, I mean, I think that's just the tagline, but Chibi Robo, Luigi's Mansion, and Pokemon Coliseum. So that's very exciting. You know, it's 4 players, local or online, so that's cool. Higher resolution than, like, they upscaled the resolution. You can remap the controls, and there's also a Nintendo Switch Online GameCube controller, similar to how they have the N64 controller and the SNES controller, NES, Sega Genesis. And the GameCube controller also has the game chat button to allow you to access that within the Nintendo Switch Online stuff while you're using the GameCube controller. During that developer Q&A that I attended, they also confirmed that if you have the adapter that allows you to play use your GameCube controller on the Switch 2 or the Switch 1, you will be able to use that on the Switch 2. So if you don't want to buy it, but you still want to play on a GameCube controller, you will be able to do that if you have the way to connect it. So that's good news. Next up was Deltarune chapters 1 through 4. I know if you're an Undertale fan, you are going to be very excited for that. Borderlands 4 also coming to Nintendo Switch 2. The Civilization 7 Nintendo Switch 2 edition. This is kind of similar to those first party titles we talked about, where there's going to be an upgradable version of this. If you own Civ 7 on Switch 1, you'll be able to upgrade to the Switch 2 version. And that Switch 2 version is probably going to run better, but most importantly, it's going to use the mouse functionality. And I'll be able to talk a little bit about that in the next segment here. 2K came out and announced that WWE 2K and NBA 2K are coming. There's a game called Survival Kids. Enter the Gungeon 2, which, by the way, looks like a lot of fun. It takes it from the kind of pixel art style to 3D visuals, even though it's still the same kind of top-down perspective. There's a game called Star Seeker Astroneer Expeditions. And from what I understand, this actually kind of cut out, the Nintendo Direct cut out during this for some people. I did not experience that because I was watching it live at the event. But yeah, these were the things that, from what I understand, there was a technical difficulty that prevented this from going out to a lot of people. Then Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, and Kunitsugami, the Capcom kind of strategy game from last year. And then we got Hollow Knight Silk Song, just part of the sizzle reel, which was surprising to me because I think that's kind of a big deal. They did confirm coming 2025, which, of course, 2 years ago we heard that this game was coming, or maybe 3 years ago we heard that this game was coming out in the next 12 months, and here we are way more than 12 months later, still waiting for this game to come out. Then Star Wars Outlaws is coming to Switch 2, along with a game that looks like an indie title called Fast Fusion. Let me look up what this game is about here. And it's not even in the press release, but it looks kind of like an F-Zero style game. And then they said this is going to be the final announcement from our third-party partners. And, it was kind of like a very gothic-looking trailer. And then I saw the kind of the up close of this character's hand as he's sitting there, and I immediately said, "This is a From Software joint. That is a From Software hand right there." And sure enough, the screen just shows From Software right across it, and people lost their mind in the room. And it's a game called The Dusk Bloods, and it's going to be an exclusive title for Switch 2. And there's actually, if you go on Nintendo.com, I guess if you're listening to this on the Patreon, you might be listening to this before, but Friday of this week, there is an interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director of all the Souls-like games that have cemented him as a legend, on Nintendo's website, talking a little bit more about what Dusk Bloods is. But basically, from what I understand, it is a multiplayer game that is PvEVP or PvPvE. So let me look this up here. So I have the thing right here. I'm just going to read this. It says, "The moon tears will flow for one and one alone in The Dusk Bloods, a brand new multiplayer title from the creators of Dark Souls and Elden Ring, From Software. Available exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2, The Dusk Bloods launches next year, so it's a 2026 release. Read more in our upcoming Developer Diary series, Creator's Voice, with the game's director Hidetaka Miyazaki, coming on April 4th. Okay. So not a lot of information there, but yeah, we'll probably learn a lot more by the time most people are listening to this episode. Next up was a game that I think fooled a lot of people. I didn't know what to think this was. So you see Kirby and his star on the screen. And at first I was like, okay, it's a new Kirby game. And then I was like, oh, this is definitely a tease. They're going to pivot and it's going to be a new Smash Brothers game. And then the star kind of grows some exhaust pipes, and I immediately was like, this is a Kirby Air Ride game. And sure enough, it was Kirby Air Riders, the first new game in this series in a long time. I think the last one was on GameCube. And yeah, let's see. It doesn't. Oh yeah, brand new title originated from the Nintendo GameCube classic racing action game Kirby Air Ride. So we have speculated on this podcast, what is Masahiro Sakurai, the man behind Super Smash Brothers, the man who created Kirby, what is he up to? He said he recorded all of his YouTube videos 2 years ago because he was actually been working on a different project. And sure enough, I guess it's Kirby Air Riders, and it is a racing action title, and it is coming to Nintendo Switch 2 on, or I guess in 2025. And then we got our final announcement, and this is when I was so certain it was going to be a 3D Mario game. I thought this was the easiest slam dunk in the world, that they were going to close out with a 3D Mario game. And it was a 3D platformer that looks like a Mario game, but it is not. It is Donkey Kong Bananza. And basically, it's like, what if Donkey Kong was in a Mario Odyssey style game? And the world is destructible. It's a kind of an action platforming game, and I actually got to play it. And I will talk about that in the main segment. But that was how they closed it out. I talked about last week when the other Nintendo Direct came out, and I think that did actually a good job of clearing the table. And I gave it a C plus. And I told Matt Miller, who was my guest last week, I was like, look, a C plus is great for a system that is 8+ years deep into its life cycle. I said, you can get by that. That's actually a very good grade for a system that is that old. I also said that if we come out of the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal direct and we say that was a C plus direct, I think that they're in trouble, because a launch reveal, whatever you want to call this, direct, needs to come out swinging. And I think they did just that. I don't think it's the best direct they've ever done. I think that the Switch 1 reveal lineup was a little bit stronger. But that said, like, this is kind of an incredible collection of games from third-party partners, an incredible lineup of Switch, or I'm sorry, Nintendo created games. I'm I almost want to give it an A minus. I'm going to give it a B plus, because I think that there are some key things that we're missing from this lineup. I mean, Mario being the most glaring example, but also like having Nintendo Switch 2 welcome, what was it called? Welcome Party, Welcome Tour, right? Man, I'm losing my mind. Yeah, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. That is not the killer app that I think that they should have launched with. I think that a Nintendo Switch 2 version of Mario Maker would have been the killer app that would be like, okay, yeah, this is a reason that you have the mouse controls. Now, obviously, Metroid Prime 4 has mouse controls. Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 Edition has mouse controls. Civ 7 has mouse controls. Other games do. Dragon Drive have mouse controls. But I feel like a distinct lack of Mario. And yes, Mario Kart was there. My prediction, honestly, is that we are going to get a Switch or another Nintendo Direct after the Switch 2 launches, probably sometime in late June, after SGF and all that Summer Game Fest stuff, the dust settles there. And I think that is where we're going to learn about a Mario title that is coming this holiday season. That is my biggest prediction. And I think we're going to learn a lot more about what the next year and a half is going to look like for the Nintendo Switch 2. But that you can't factor that in to this direct. So I think I'm going to give it a B plus. And then, once the Switch 2 website went live, there were some other smaller details. Again, it's coming out June 5th, in case you missed that when I talked about it earlier. But the biggest thing that was missing from the direct, conspicuously absent, was the price. And we learned that $450 is the standard edition of the Switch 2. And then also the so let's see, 400, the Switch 1, or I'm sorry, the Mario Kart World, there's a bundle with that, and that will be $500. And then here's the thing that I think a lot of people are kicking up a lot of problems with, and that is that we learned that it's not going to be a standardized price really for a lot of these games. And it's definitely not the standardized $60. They tested the waters a little bit last or 2 years ago with Tears of the Kingdom being $70, and now they're testing it even more with Mario Kart World being $80. And we'll get into that a little bit later. We learned that some new amiibos are coming from the Zelda franchise as well. So it's not just Street Fighter that we're getting amiibos. We're also getting Zelda amiibos. In the champions, all four of them are getting their own amiibos. Um, and yeah, I mean, those are the biggest things I think that came out afterwards. Um, but I think that, overall, very good direct, not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I came away thinking like, okay, there's a lot I want to play on the Switch 2. And also, I really want to get my hands on the Switch 2, which thankfully I was able to shortly thereafter. So that's what I thought about all these. I know I kind of went rapid fire with those announcements. Now I'm going to head over to the All Things Nintendo Patreon page and get some reactions from the community over there. So I'm just going to read these off and react here. So let's start right here. Timothy Hart Jacobs says the Switch 2 using the same major concepts with tweaks to be bigger and better was the best decision. I'm excited we'll be getting 4K 60 when docked. No longer needing to use Discord or the Nintendo app to chat is also nice, though I'm not convinced the audio will be that great across my living room. The opening lineup of games isn't as strong as I was hoping for, with a lot of games being third-party ports I've played on other platforms. The new Donkey Kong and Mario Kart look fun. 8 out of 10 for the presentation. I'll be pre-ordering it on April 9th. And yes, that is another piece of news that we have not talked about, is that the pre-orders will start on April 9th. All right, next up is Dusty Beeman. These are all on the Patreon page, by the way. Go join even as a free member if you want to get in on some of these discussions. There's also the new $3 tier where you can join, and that just gives you access to the community Discord. Dusty Beeman says, I went into this thinking that I was very uninterested in the new Switch. I haven't touched my Switch to spend a significant amount of time gaming on it in probably 6 months. So how am I going to justify buying a new one? My mind was definitely changed. I won't be buying on launch, but I will be looking to purchase this holiday season. Maybe they will have a restock around Black Friday. Not saying the price on stream was ridiculous and unacceptable. Overall, I'd give the presentation a 6 out of 10. Okay, tougher crowd with Dusty Beeman there. Marshall Thompson said Silk Song this year got to be A plus, laughing emoji. All right, fair enough. Switch. I mean, for some people, Silk Song is kind of the the thing that everybody that they're looking forward to the most, right? It is the golden chalice that they are waiting to be revealed and waiting to learn more about, waiting to get a release date for, especially. Tux DC says $90 physical games ruined my hype. Big N always seems to go too greedy after a successful generation. Hopefully, this is another 3DS situation that gets an early price drop, console and games, or I'm going to move on to a new hobby. Return of Region Lock to sell it for cheaper in Japan is also really crummy. Yeah, that's unfortunate. And yeah, the price thing is a lot. I don't think the consoles are that. I don't think the console itself is that overpriced, and I'll tell you, I do want to talk about that after I read more of the reactions. But yeah, the games being that expensive is rough. Chaps my ass says, I think Nintendo is bringing us a solid piece of hardware here. 8 times the storage is nice. Bigger screen, built-in mic. Crazy that Nintendo is finally okay with us to talk to people online. For games, we are getting lots of great third party, and I'm super pumped for Elden Ring. As far as first party, it felt pretty light in the loafers. Mario Kart World looks amazing, though, and will sell consoles and will be the reason I will buy this day one. The wheelchair basketball game looks pretty weak, and I do not think I'll be spending my money on that virtual Switch 2 demo game where you walk around on the Switch, Nintendo Switch 2 World Welcome Tour. Overall, solid B plus for me, and I think we will have a lot of great things to look forward to. Yeah, I think I'm in line with that. I think that there are definitely like a couple of games that I'm very excited for, and then some that are, maybe not the most interesting for me. Next up, Robert Sosa, 8 out of 10. Most of us wanted a bigger, better Switch, not some new gimmick, and I think we got that. Can't wait for all those third-party games that Switch couldn't handle: Cyberpunk, Elden Ring, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Madden. The Switch 2 editions of games will definitely have me going back to some old favorites. Pretty pleased overall. Jeremy Arthur says, as someone who prefers physical game copies, not a fan of the new key cards. Bravely Default HD was one of the highlights from today's presentation, and knowing I will not be able to get a physical copy is disappointing. Still likely to pick up a console, but not relinquishing my OG Switch anytime soon. Yeah, and I did see that a lot of the games that are Switch 2 seem to have mostly be a download, right? Like, which, that's not great. If you're buying a physical game, you should just get the physical game. I did see that Cyberpunk, you do not need to download the game. It's like I think it's like 64 gigabytes is actually on the cartridge. So there'll be updates, obviously, that they'll have to release and everything, but um Zek Three Sword Sama. As a Nintendo fan, I'm very hyped for this. Basically, now that I know what the Switch 2 is going to be, there is pretty much zero reason for me to buy any other console in my mind. I can now play Elden Ring, Final Fantasy VII, etc. I think the lack of day one games is a bit of a concern, but frankly, my backlog is so crazy, I'll be very happy to play my Switch games on Switch 2 and play the heck out of Mario Kart World with my family with some bigger third party and first party game releases. I think I'm concerned that the release dates weren't spelled out. While prices are never discussed during the direct, I think there are valid concerns about the prices of games. It was bad enough that Nintendo rarely never puts their first party games on sale, and now I just see $70 plus first party games being the norm for Nintendo, with sales, quote unquote, bringing the prices back down to what we consider normal. I'll be buying a Switch 2 day one since I'm a huge fan. I believe in what Nintendo is doing, but I certainly see myself buying maybe 6 games a year if prices are north of $60 for a game. That's fair. That is 100% fair. Mad Genie Confused Koala says, I am overall really excited for the console. Cannot wait to purchase it and compare between my OLED and it. All right, just a few more here. Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man. I thought it was a great reveal. The price is whereabouts I thought it would be. Mario Kart World looks amazing. The new Hyrule Warriors looked very interesting. New Kirby and 3D Donkey Kong both look really fun. And a great surprise with From Software exclusive thrown in. I don't know what I make of the mouse feature just yet. I'll get into that a little bit in the next segment, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man. But all in all, very exciting. Owen McCarter says, as excited as I am for Switch 2, I'm also really peeved at the ultra successful Nintendo has lost any consumer friendly practices they may have had before. They had no talk of pricing for the cost of the system or game upgrades during the presentation. Mario Kart costing $80, getting rid of gold points sucks. The list goes on. Edit, can't forget the paid tech demo welcome tour. Yeah, that is rough. That's a tough pill to swallow. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. Andy Junkins says, great presentation. I expected a higher price, but did not see $80 to $90 game prices coming. The new FromSoft game looks awesome, as did the new DK. The 4K docked 1080p handheld is expected and good as well. The immediate concern I have is the ability to pre-order one next week. Yeah, I mean, pre-ordering seems very convoluted, and I know they're trying to discourage scalpers, but it seems like it's going to be kind of a pain. Zach Bencall says, pretty solid presentation overall. I, for one, thought this was coming fall to winter, so imagine my hype when June 5th was announced as the release day. As someone who works in school, I'm pleased that our last day is June 6th. Wow, perfect. Catch me starting my summer with a Mario Kart World party. Yes, perfect timing, Zach. And then Matt, aka Stormageddon, our dear friend over there, just in all caps, Kirby Air Ride, sickos, rise up. It's our time now. Yeah, it probably is. That game is going to be awesome. It's going to be so much fun, and it's coming this year. So, yeah, thanks to everybody who wrote in on the Patreon. I also had a few others that I wanted to talk about from Discord. So Greg from Columbus over on Discord said, my biggest surprise of the Direct is that the hardware seems more powerful than I expected. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it is if I had to guess, it's somewhere between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, but closer to the PlayStation 4 on that spectrum. But I don't. I have no way of knowing that aside from what I saw. Three Sword Sama over on Discord. Let's see. To me, $450 is pretty reasonable considering the price of both the PS5 and Steam Deck. I think that's pretty fair to get best of both those consoles with the first party games and exclusives that will come to Switch 2. Um, I will say that the games at $70 plus will make me much more picky about what I buy. And I know we already read Three Sword Sama over on Patreon, but I also thought that was a good point. Nintendo 101 on Discord, maybe the reaction of the event. They say, we really might need to have a Patreon Mario Kart tournament or something. And I just want to throw this out there. When the Switch 2 launches, I absolutely want to host a Patreon or All Things Nintendo community Mario Kart World night. I don't know how easy it will be to get everybody, 24 people, into a room, but that sounds like a blast. I don't know. I mean, it seems like Game Chat only supports up to 4 people, but there's got to be something we can do, even if it's just a Discord call with no game chat. That would be a lot of fun. Wouldn't you know it? We have a community Discord. So then we have Matthew Konitzer on Blue Sky saying, I'm having a hard time not thinking the price on the Switch 2 is justified. It really does seem like a massive step up, not only from the original, but from pretty much every handheld out there right now. Now, I mean, it's tough to say it's a step up from the Steam Deck when the Steam Deck can play like really high resolution games. But that said, Nintendo has the ace in the hole that they will always have, which they have the greatest developer in the world as an exclusive, and that developer is Nintendo. Nobody else gets Zelda. Nobody else gets Mario. Nobody else gets Mario Kart, Animal Crossing. I mean, there's versions of those games on mobile, but they're not like the flagship games. So, you know, I think that honestly, I think the price is justified for the console. It is in the $80 Mario Kart World um, price tag that really was the sticker shock for me. I could see it's $70. If Nintendo wanted to go to $70, that is what a lot of games on PlayStation and Xbox are charging right now. And that seems like it's kind of par for the course these days, as much as we don't like it. $70, I don't really get too upset about these days, but $80 is a really tough pill to swallow. And I mean, maybe we'll learn why that is on April 17th. But I'm really hoping that is not the standard, but I gotta imagine it's gonna be the standard, which is really, really disheartening. Um, but all right, well, those are all the reactions. And now that the table is set with all of that news and all of those reactions from the Nintendo Direct, I am going to take my first break of this episode. And when I get back, I will share my experience from attending the hands-on event that Nintendo hosted in New York, including what games I played while I was there and my thoughts on playing the Switch 2. I will be right back. We are back, and during this main segment, I am going to share all about what it was like spending a full day with Nintendo out in New York for their first ever Nintendo Switch 2 hands-on event. So I flew out to New York on Tuesday night and, spent the evening there, and I knew that I had a very early morning on Wednesday because I'm in Minnesota, so I'm on Central Time. So I flying out to the East Coast, I lose an hour, and on top of that, the doors of this event opened at 7:30 in the morning. I could not get to sleep until like 1 a.m. And also, not to mention, the hotel that I was staying in was there was like either an impound lot or a body shop or something. So there were tow trucks going. But anyway, I was extremely tired, and but I kind of was running off of adrenaline the entire time because I was so excited to go to this event. So I walked 30 minutes across town, got to the event center that they were holding this at, and it's a pretty big line of people, and even though they're all media or influencers, got to go up, say hi to everybody. It was incredible seeing all these people again, because like, when Game Informer closed back in August, I didn't know if I was going to be going to a lot of these events in the future. So to see all these people again, and also the outpouring of love, I cannot say how much I appreciate the the people that were, so congratulatory and nice about Game Informer coming back. Really, it meant a lot to me. But you're not here to talk about that. We talked about Game Informer last week. But the event was, just a bunch of media people from across the country. I think some of them were maybe from other parts of the world, but they kind of shepherded us in to this like kind of giant room with screens set up and everything. Uh, President of Nintendo of America, Doug Bowser, got up and made some opening remarks, and then it was kind of off to the races. Actually, wait, Doug Bowser talked after the direct. Before the direct, it was just kind of like us waiting and having some remarks from some other Nintendo employees. And then the direct started, and we all watched up on these giant screens. And it was really cool to be there and have everybody reacting together. It wasn't quite the Nintendo store that if you follow them on Instagram, you see that they have watch parties and people are losing their minds. This was a little bit more of a professional affair, but you had people definitely like laughing and like kind of getting excited when something like Kirby Air Riders came on, or you heard gasps when From Software was announced as bringing a new game to Switch 2. So that was a very fun occasion. And then, they're like, okay, well, we're going to start bringing people down to the event space where you're going to get hands on with the Switch 2. But in the meantime, you can get a closer look at all the accessories and all that stuff. So they lifted up these cloths that were over top of display cases, and you could see just all of the accessories, the Switch 2, just all in display cases. And they're very well lit, so it was cool to see all that stuff laid out and get kind of up close and personal with a lot of those accessories. um so get down to the main demo station, and they kind of bring you in, and there are a few different stations that we go to. And the first station is Mario Kart World Grand Prix. And this was just our first taste with Mario Kart. And it starts off, and you can select your character. There's characters that have different costumes and everything you can choose from. So I was playing, and I chose Yoshi because that's my Mario Kart main. And it's kind of cool the way it feels definitively Mario Kart, but when the race starts and there's 24 characters all kind of getting off the line at the same time, it is chaos. And you also see there's a lot more items being thrown around because there's 24 characters all on screen at once. And it took me a while to realize how like you can grind on the rails and everything. And I will say that I finally figured it out, and I got up on there, but jumping off a ramp and landing on like a rail. And what I learned is I was expecting it to be more like Tony Hawk, where it's like you're grinding and you can jump off at any time. It really more reminded me of the grinding in like the modern Sonic games, where it's like there's sometimes there's even like three rails next to each other, and you can jump between them with pretty relative ease. And so that was really cool. The course that I played, it was just like a lava themed level. I don't know if it's like Bowser's something or other. I think there were like Bowser statues in it. And then played a little bit of that, and then moved on to the next section, which was Knockout Tour. And man, this is where it really started to feel like a different Mario Kart experience. So like while we're waiting for the everybody to get into the Knockout Tour session, doing free roam, and I'm just driving around, and I see a lot of people like kind of congregating over on this side. I'm like, I'm gonna go off to like off the beaten path. So I went out into like this field, and there's like bouncy flowers, and so I'm like, I hit it, and I'm like jumping up, and then there's other things like I drop down into like a ravine, and I'm cruising around on the water, and I found like a stack of coins that I could pick up, and I don't know like if there's like stuff that you'll be able to do with those coins. I'm assuming you can buy like cosmetics or something. Um, I also found a star in the middle of it that gave me invincibility. So I drove around. It seems like there's like minor rewards for exploration. I didn't see anything like completely mind blowing, but there it was a very beautiful world. I'm excited just to see like what these the creators behind Mario Kart, which are always they always bring such creativity to the worlds and the courses and everything that they create. I'm excited to see what they come up with and how to populate this open world and like ways to entice players to explore. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot more about that April 17th. But you know, I'm in that ravine and I'm like, all right, how do I get back up there? And then I see there's a giant pipe and I drive into the pipe thinking like, I don't know what to expect. And it just took me right back up to the top. And then right around there, it was like, all right, time to race. So I did a knockout tour and I was doing really well actually. So you know, the first checkpoint, I think it was 18 was like the cutoff. So I had to be below 18 to continue racing, and I was at like I think I was in the lead or I was very close to the lead. I was in the lead for a while, and so I survived the first cutoff. And then you know, I was doing actually a good job of dodging. They have a lot of indicators that tell you like when somebody's coming up behind you or like a shell or something is coming. So I was keeping an eye on these indicators. And I was able to dodge a lot of them. Like, there was a bullet bill coming up, and I just like kind of merged over a little bit, and he went right past me. And you know, there's a lot of shortcuts you can take, but I was doing a really good job of avoiding that, drafting, drifting, all kinds of stuff that was giving me boosts, and I was like, man, I might win this. And then Mario Karted all over me because you know, there's kind of a rubber band feature in Mario Kart. If you haven't played a Mario Kart game in a while, you know, basically if you're further back, you get a lot of really great power ups. If you're further forward, you don't get as many great power ups, and you're also going to be targeted. So I was in first place, and then suddenly a blue shell comes out of nowhere. I didn't have the horn or anything that I could block it with. So I'm like, all right, cool, that's fine. And by the way, when you get hit with something, it's not just like a canned animation of you flipping up in the air and landing. It seems like it's more physics based because I feel like every time I was hit with something, it was a different kind of tumble that I had. So that was kind of cool. And then the other thing is that, you know, it started feeling more like Mario Kart's rubber banding once that happened because I was recovered and then I was like in like third or fourth place. So I'm like, all right, I'm still like well under the threshold of cutoff, and I'm just make it through this checkpoint and then I will continue going. And that was not the case because I was then hit with a red shell, and then somebody with a star hit me. And before I knew it, I was down to like 15th place. And I was like, oh no. And I see the checkpoint right up there. I make a Herculean effort to get up to the front. And unfortunately, I was 13th when I got to the checkpoint and I was eliminated. But that mode, so much fun. I can't wait to play more of that. And if we end up doing kind of that Mario Kart uh, World night once the Switch 2 comes out for the All Things Nintendo patrons, that is going to be a mode that we play a lot because that was just fun, chaotic. You know, I'm so excited to play more of that. But also Grand Prix is so much fun as well, as is Free Roam. Um, but yeah, as I mentioned in the first segment, I have always wondered since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe got its Booster Course Pass, what in the world could Nintendo do to one up Mario Kart 8 Deluxe without feeling like a step back, but still doing something different, not feeling like another port. And I think they've done it with Mario Kart World. I think this feels like a meaningful evolution. It feels like the most ambitious Mario Kart game ever in so many ways, and I'm so excited for this game. It's going to be absolutely the killer app for Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes out in June. Um, I mean, look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and it sold about 60 million units, and I would not be surprised if Mario Kart World gets off the line really fast. When I did not mean to do a racing pun there, but I would not be surprised if Mario Kart World doesn't just sell gangbusters. Almost similar to how Breath of the Wild had a 1-to-1 attach rate with the original Switch for like the first few months. Like literally anybody who bought a Switch bought Breath of the Wild. I would not be surprised if Mario Kart World comes very close to that as well. So that was probably my favorite thing I played, but a close second. After we played Mario Kart World, a few rounds of that, I was, like, oh, there's more games back there. And I walked to the back, and somebody in PR goes, oh, here's some of the stuff that you can play in there. And they talked about like Dragon Drive, some of the third party games. They said, oh, this is also your first chance to play Metroid Prime 4. And I could feel myself light up like a Christmas tree. I was so excited to get my hands on this game. We have been waiting for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for more than 8 years. So I guess it's been like just under 8 years because they announced it at E3 2017. So I guess 7 years and 9 months we've been waiting to finally play Metroid Prime 4. And they had the Nintendo Switch 2 version there. And it was a relatively short demo, but you see the cutscene that opens, like, so like there's like a research facility, the Federation force, or the Galactic Federation research facility is under attack from space pirates. And you see like this battle playing out, and then you see a ship soar in and blast away enemies. Really, really impressive graphics. I was surprised at how good this game looks. And then it lands and you see Samus emerge and then jump down, and oh my gosh, it was goosebumps when this happened. And then it's kind of like a brief tutorial, like, okay, you got to get through this kind of damaged corridor, and it's like, all right, you can blast this to get through, and then like, oh, this piece of metal is like curled over and blocking most of the walkway, turn into a morph ball and roll underneath of it. And then it's like, oh, this door is jammed, but you can use Samus's scan to like hack it and open it. And so like different things like that. And then like I had my first enemy encounter, and I'm like, I can shoot from the hip with her beam, or you can press the left trigger and lock onto that enemy. And when you have that, you can also use the motion controls to fine tune your aiming. So I locked onto the space pirate, and then I could use the right Joy-Con to kind of aim and pull the trigger and shoot. And I'm not the biggest motion control guy, but I really enjoyed using this as like a way to do it. On top of that, for the Switch 2 version, you can at any point turn the Joy-Con sideways and use the mouse functionality. And you don't need to go into a menu or anything. It almost works like magic. And you still use the left Joy-Con as you would with the buttons and everything. You use the right Joy-Con as a mouse, and that gives you better aiming while still being able to move around with the left Joy-Con and joystick to walk. So it's not really like a WASD keyboard situation where it was always been my problem with mouse and keyboard. I'm fine aiming with a mouse. It's navigating with a keyboard. It just feels like I'm like fitting a square peg into a round hole when it comes to mouse and keyboard controls. So much so that for my PC, I actually have a pad that has a joystick built into it that I can use if I ever want to play a mouse and keyboard shooter without sacrificing my ability to use a mouse for aiming in a shooting game. So it kind of gives that similar vibe. And I think I still prefer using the motion controls just because it felt so intuitive to just lock onto the enemy and then point and shoot. It felt really great. The graphics are incredible. This is one of the best looking Nintendo games that has ever existed. And not only that, but then there's a boss battle that I came to, and it's Abarax, I think is his name. He's just this giant beast, and he fuses with a Metroid that comes down, and he just starts shooting energy waves and energy blasts my way. And when you're locked on, you can press one of the buttons and he'll dash to the side. So I'm dodging that. Samus also has a double jump, which, when these energy waves, the shock waves that this monster's sending out come, I had to just see if they were off the ground or on the ground. If they were on the ground, I double jumped over them. If they were on the ground, I had to quickly turn into a morph ball. And the enemy had like 4 weak spots on its chest and stomach, and it would constantly move its arms to be in different like shielding positions, and you had to use the motion controls, or presumably the mouse controls. I'd moved off the mouse controls by this point. And aiming at the weak points using the motion controls. And you can also do the thing where I was starting to run low on health because I'm still getting the hang of how this game plays. And even though it's a pretty straightforward boss, I was taking some damage. I didn't die or anything, but I was taking some damage, and I was like, oh no, there's a health pickup, but the boss is right there. And then I remembered there was an ability that you could hold Samus's like charge her beam, and it would attract nearby pickups. So that's really helpful as well. And so I finally beat this boss, and then it plays a cutscene with Silux, I believe is his name, and he comes in and attacks, and then it kind of ends the demo. So I was extremely impressed by Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I It was so smart of them to release Metroid Prime Remastered. This seems like a continuation of that game. It didn't see, I mean, I know that there's like the telekinesis powers that I didn't get to check out, but I was playing on performance mode, which means it was 1080p and 120 frames per second, and it was smooth as silk. It was buttery smooth. It looked so good in action, and this is suddenly, I mean, I already suspected this was going to be one of my most anticipated games of the year, but now that I've played like 15 or 20 minutes, it is absolutely one of my most anticipated games of 2025. Excuse me. A lot of talking in this episode of just me. Then I decided I wanted to go check out I would say the last of like the three big games on Nintendo Switch 2 that were announced at that direct, and that was Donkey Kong Bonanza. And I want to say that this really, really, really felt like Mario Odyssey's formula, but with Donkey Kong. Now, I started off on Ignite Island or Ignite Isle, and this is like a tutorial area. It's like a mining facility that we saw in the trailer, and basically the whole thing is like everything is destructible, like all of the world is. So like if you're like in the mine, you can just like start punching, and there's four face buttons. One of them is jump, the other three are different attacks. So one punches up, one punches forward, one punches down. And then you can also grab chunks of the land out by holding, I think it's the right trigger, and Donkey Kong will rip a giant chunk out of the ground, and you can hold the right trigger again, and you can aim it, and using either the joystick or the motion controls, aim where you want to throw it. And that's a really powerful attack, and that's sometimes the only way to defeat enemies. There's like a flying propeller monster, and I tried to punch it, and Donkey Kong's hand blew up like a balloon, and he like shook it like it was hurting him. So I guess that's not the way you do that. But so what I did was I grabbed the piece out of the ground and threw it at him, and yeah, I mean that was the way to defeat it. And then other monsters, like they have like either shells or something, you need to throw that at them to knock that, and then you can go punch them after the shell is cracked. But yeah, it's a lot of exploration. Excuse me. It's also a lot of discovery, right? Like the whole premise is you are going around and you're finding these giant banana gems, and they're almost like the power moons in Mario Odyssey. And he even does like a little pose, and like the power moon name comes up. So they won't tell us who is making this game, but man, did my spidey senses go off when I played this, thinking like this feels like a Mario Odyssey game. This feels like the team that made Mario Odyssey decided to make a Donkey Kong game. So I would not be surprised if whenever they talk about this game more, if they don't like reveal that like this is the team behind Mario Odyssey. Why they wouldn't surface that, if that is in fact the case, is beyond me, because like that, I feel like that would get people even more hyped for this game. But after I played through the tutorial, like Donkey Kong was transported to this other area of the world. And he's on this mysterious island with these inhabitants who all have like quests that you can do. And you talk to one person, like, oh, the lake is plugged up. There's like a waterfall, but like they put this like monstrosity in the middle of it. You need to go remove it. So I needed to defeat the monsters in that area. And then I got a key, and that opened it up. And then it opened this like hole that I could jump down into. But unfortunately, that part was not in the demo. So it transported me back up. But there's like multiple layers to the different levels. What else? So, oh, also like you can there's a button you press and Donkey Kong will roll. I think it might be the left trigger, and if you're holding a piece of rock, you can press that button, and instead of him rolling, he will actually surf on the rock that he's holding. So that's a really fun way to get around as well. So yeah, this was extremely fun. I think I need a little bit more time with it to fully appreciate what it's doing, and it's coming out in July, so it's not like this is like a far off game or anything like that. But this demo was a fun proof of concept for like, okay, they're doing some zany stuff with this. Donkey Kong is extremely animated, like so many facial animations. Like he looks like ripped straight out of a cartoon, and he looks great. Honestly, like the new character design looks incredible. And yeah, it comes out July 17th, I think. So that is right around the corner. Yeah, July 17th on Switch 2. Having the fully destructible environments feels fantastic. And again, it feels like a spiritual successor to Mario Odyssey, but starring Donkey Kong. And by the way, I do want to say that I think I called this. I said it was either going to be Donkey Kong Country, but probably more likely a 3D Donkey Kong game, which when you consider it's been 25 years since we've gotten a 3D Donkey Kong game, I'll take that as a win that I predicted this in a past episode. Next up, I played Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, the game that should be a tech demo. And I had a good time with it, but I don't know if it's worth extra money. That is my key takeaway here. Like I went in and it's like, hey, did you know that there's HD Rumble? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that like the Switch 2 instruction manual will tell me that. The thing that's actually packed in with the Switch 2. And I played a few mini games. There was one where it was like, okay, here's a demo of the HD Rumble, and it was like maracas, and you could press a button and it would switch from the beans in it to rubber ball, and it really was remarkable how different it felt, like shaking one with the rubber ball and shaking one with with the beans from a maraca. And then like there were different like quests you had to do, like, okay, well, shake the maraca 20 times, now shake a rubber ball 20 times, now gently roll the beans around in the maraca, now do this. And it's like, okay, yeah, but like this feels like a free piece of software that should be included with the Switch 2. This should not be an extra thing. Then there was okay, we're going to show the mouse functionality, and we're going to demo the how the mouse works. So it was like you basically have you control a UFO on the screen, and you're going back and forth dodging these spikes that are falling from the ceiling. And then there was another one where it was like, okay, this is the more difficult version of this. You have to collect stars while you dodge spikes. And then what was the other one I played where it was like show, like you had to guess where you took the mouse controller, you put the mouse Joy-Con on the table, and you moved it left and right, and you had to find what frequency on like this scale had the most intense rumble, and then you hit a button to say this one. And based on how close you get a different amount of medals. The more medals you get, you unlock different mini games, and you can access more parts of the Switch 2, because the entire thing just takes place on top of a Switch 2, and you're like shrunk down running around. But yeah, there's different mini games you can play in that, and it's fun. But I guess you'll have to make a call for yourself if you think it's worth it to pay extra money. I think that those $5 would be better served going towards your $80 purchase of Mario Kart World, personally. But that's just me. It does aptly show what the Switch 2 is capable of, but I think other games do that better. Like Dragon Drive. That game, it wasn't my favorite thing that I played. It's the wheelchair basketball game. You can press the shoulder buttons to pass, but like really the main attraction is how you put two Joy-Cons down and you push forward with the mouse controls. And based on which one you push, that's how it goes. So if you push left, the left wheel, you'll go right. You push the right wheel, you'll go left. You can go in reverse. You can go forward with both and pick up speed if you keep going like consistently. If you press the triggers on them, it's like you're gripping it, so it'll slow you down. And then you can raise your hands up, and it'll actually raise the character's hands, and he'll wave, and you can call for the ball. And then to shoot, you take your hand off the wheel, and you hold the Joy-Con up in the air and flick your wrist like a basketball shot, and it will shoot that way, and that's how you score. Um, it's really fun, and it shows that the mouse functionality works way better than I thought it would. I did not expect to come away being like, okay, well, the mouse is the one of the killer functionalities of the Switch 2, but it really kind of is, right? Like the mouse does a really great job of picking up what you're doing, and that was also on display with Super Mario Party Jamboree. I got to play some of the new mini games there, one of which was with the camera. But let's start with the mouse, since I'm talking about the mouse. Um, so I played 6 mini games with the mouse controls, and let's see, one of them was you're kind of, you have a wind up car, and you grab it using the mouse and you pull it back towards you, and then you release it, and you're on one end of a bridge and your opponents are on the other side of the bridge, and you can run into each other, but your goal is to get to the other side, and that's how you score. So that was a lot of fun. There's also, like, it's called, I think, shell hockey, where it's basically air hockey. Like, you have one your mouse is like the air hockey paddle, and then there's a shell going back and forth. So you're moving the mouse as though you're playing air hockey, which is a really great implementation of the mouse controls. There's another one where it's like an electrified maze, like a really narrow maze, and you use the mouse, you grab a toad, and you bring him through the maze, but he swings around, so you have to be really careful not to run into a wall, because he electrocutes, and then he goes back to the last checkpoint that you crossed, and you want to finish the maze before your opponents. So a lot of really cool implementations of the mouse. And again, it was rare that the mouse controls failed me. There were a couple times where I got a little overzealous with my rolling of the wheelchair and drag and drive. I keep saying drag and drive. Where it's like, okay, well, I was moving both hands, but then I realized, like, oh, because I was going so fast, I accidentally tilted this, and it stopped activating. So you do have to be kind of careful not to lift it off the table, because it does end up it doesn't register if it's over top of the table. And by the way, I did also try it where, because I don't have a table, like, you can see that I have a couch. If you're what, I guess maybe you can't because it's kind of off screen, but I have a couch down in my new office here, and I don't have a coffee table or anything. So I was like, all right, well, how does this work on my pants? And the Nintendo spokesperson, or not Nintendo spokesperson, Nintendo demoer was like, oh, you can put it on if you have like pants on, you can act, if you have pants on, if you're not wearing shorts, that's what I was trying to say. You can put them on your legs, and it works just as well. And I actually tried that, and some people actually preferred that. I think I may prefer the table a little bit, but like, it actually didn't feel weird doing it on my legs, especially for drag and drive. So after doing the mouse controls, the mouse mini games on Super Mario Party Jamboree, I went over to first I did the camera control, or the camera, excuse me, the camera mini games. And what those did was it was Bowser Live, I think it's called, and there were 4 people, there was 1 camera, and it does a really great job of separating each individual person. So there were 2 people to my left and 1 person to my right, and it pulled each person individually, and it superimposed them into the game. So like, you look and it's like, all right, here's player 1 over here in the crowd, with like the Shy Guys and Goombas and everybody and Koopa Troopas who are at this game show that Bowser's hosting. Here's player 2, and then over here's player 3. Even though we're all using the same camera, it pulled us apart in that way. And then it had like stuff where it's like almost like a Simon Says. I think it was Talking Flower Says. So the Talking Flower from Mario Wonder was back, and he was like, Mario, squat. And everybody who had like a Mario hat, it put a Mario hat on your character, and you're actually on TV, and it's like, Mario, squat. Luigi, don't squat. So like, you had to listen to, like, if it said do or don't, and do that type of stuff. And then the last people standing after the timer runs out wins. There was another one where it was like a question block above, and you had to like hit the thing as hard as you can, or as fast as you can, score as many coins as possible. That was pretty standard. And then there was one that, being in a public setting, you basically had to make as many movements and yell as loud as possible to score points. And then they chose which team did the most. And I mean, it was fun. It recognized you really well. The only time that there was any problem was when the person next to me, whose shirt was the exact color of the wall behind them, it didn't register that they stood up when it told them to stand up. But outside of that, it was pretty flawless. And I was skeptical a little bit about the camera, but it seems like it's a pretty solid piece of technology. So I came away pretty impressed by that. And also, the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Super Mario Party Jamboree really felt like a meaningful upgrade. And speaking of that, I also went over and checked out Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 versions. And boy, let me tell you, 60 frames per, or I don't know if it was 60 or 120 frames per second. The higher resolution, higher frame rate, and HDR makes those games look stunning. I was actually debating replaying Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom over the next couple of months. I am 100% waiting for Switch 2 versions of these games because they are absolutely gorgeous with these upgrades. And that plus the new Nintendo Switch app that allows you to like send stuff to people and all that stuff. This is going to be an incredible way to play these games. Also, sharing Ultra Hand creations with your friends via that app is going to be awesome. Then Civilization 7 was the next game that I played. I think I'm coming to the end here of the games that I checked out. uh Civ 7, it's the same type of situation, right, where you have the ability to play with just the controller as you can on Switch 1 right now, or you can keep your left Joy-Con upright like it's a controller and turn your right one like a mouse and have the almost like PC controls for this. And I played like a few rounds of Civ 7 using the mouse controller. Again, I am shocked at how well it works. It just, being able to control a strategy game like that, make it feel almost comparable to a PC version. That's a really really special thing for a console to be able to achieve. Um, so I mean, I could see that being a worthwhile upgrade, and then being able to just swap between the control schemes without having to go into menus is incredible. Um, and then I ended my day by playing a little bit of GameCube. And so the GameCube, like I said earlier, it's 4 players you can play as, or you can play either locally or online. So this build of the GameCube collection had 4 games instead of the 3 launch ones. So it had Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, and Soul Calibur 2, which are the 3 launch titles. And then it also had Super Mario Strikers, the soccer game that was on GameCube. And so I would imagine that might be the first one to come out post-launch, if I had to guess, since it was playable here. So all the games that offered it back in the day still give you widescreen support. So the ones that I saw were F-Zero GX and Soul Calibur 2. So that actually filled out the screen, which was awesome. And it didn't stretch it or anything because those games had it natively built in. Unfortunately, Wind Waker does not have that option. But with the upscaling, it does look really great. That said, I do wish that the Wind Waker HD was the one that they put on here, just because not only would that give you the widescreen display, but that also makes the Triforce hunt a lot easier and a lot better. Because I'm not looking forward to replaying Wind Waker if it means that we are going to have to deal with the full Triforce quest or Triforce hunt, whatever it's called. That said, it's great to play Soul Calibur 2, controlling Link in that game. This is the first time that's been re-released, if I recall correctly. It's always been either Heihachi, which was the PlayStation bonus character, or Spawn, who was the Xbox character with all the re-releases. So to finally have this re-released, and obviously it's going to have the online play, which is crucial to making this the best version it can be. Also, F-Zero GX looks and plays amazing in 2025. I did not expect that. Hopefully that means that there's some F-Zero stuff planned in the future, but it's really really great. And then just overall impressions of the Switch 2 from my experience. The LCD screen, which was one of my biggest concerns, it looked terrific. It dashed away any concerns I had about it not being OLED. Um, yeah, it feels great in my hands. Like, the bigger size feels perfect for me. I don't have like the biggest hands in the world. I think I have, pretty average size hands for a man of my size, I guess. I'm 5'11". And yeah, I mean it I it felt really good to play on handheld mode. It felt really good. The Joy-Cons don't feel super small. When you turn the Joy-Cons sideways, if you're playing like a game like that, the S or the what is it, SL and SR buttons that are on the top, they stick out a little bit, so that way you don't need to have like the wrist strap, like the thing on top for it not to feel like a fake button. It actually feels very comfortable to play either way. But yeah, I mean, it feels like a quality build. The rail system that was on the Switch One, like, you may have had this happen to you. I certainly had it happen on one of my old Switch, my launch model Switch, where the rail system started like getting loose and it would fall off. This magnet system feels so much sturdier than the rail system ever felt for me. And yeah, I mean, the resolution, the frame rate, it all looks so good, and the HDR makes all of these games. Nintendo's always had vibrant colors, but the HDR really takes it to the next level. And I was so impressed with the Switch 2, and I can't wait to get my hands on it when it comes out in June. And as always, if you want to read more, probably way more coherent thoughts, you can read all my coverage on GameInformer.com. But I'm going to take one final break of this episode. And when I get back, we will wrap up with me doing my best to answer any questions that came in from the community related to my time with Switch 2. I will be right back. We are back for the final time this episode, and shortly after my articles went live on GameInformer.com, I put out a call to the members of the All Things Nintendo Patreon to submit any questions they had related to my time with the Nintendo Switch 2. I want to start this off by saying that I asked multiple people on Nintendo's side a ton of questions. But as you may or may not know, Nintendo is notoriously cagey about certain things. So while I may have asked about some of these things, I may not have answers for all of them, but I will do my best to answer anything that is asked. But please understand that I have not looked at any of these questions, so I'm going to be answering them on the fly. And there's a lot I still do not know or I didn't have a chance to check out, even after spending an entire day both talking about playing and playing the console, but also writing about it. Like, I've reflected on all of my time with the Switch 2 and those various games that I talked about in the last segment. But yeah, without further ado, let's put a cap on this episode with some of your questions. Nobby Buckles, aka Dave, says, "What's the most significant thing you learned with your hands-on time with the Switch 2 that isn't obvious from the direct?" Oh man, whew. I mean, I think it's that like that Nintendo magic is still there, right? Like, this is for all intents and purposes a bigger and better Switch, but with those extra features that still evoke that sense of whimsy, right? Like the camera, the like yeah, okay, everybody's done game chat for 2 decades now, but for some reason Nintendo's take on it is it just feels a little bit, it has that Nintendo magic to it, right? The camera functionality, the way that the microphone picks it up, your voice. I wish I would have had a chance to try that. It was a pretty loud environment, but it would have been cool to see if like people could hear me talking, even though there were a lot of other people around me. But really, the mouse controls, I think, are where it really comes in. From like it just works so incredibly well, and it's also hard to, I guess, without seeing it in the for yourself. It's hard to see that like the LCD screen really does look very good, even though it's not an OLED, which would probably be better, admittedly. But yeah, I would say that, just the fact that it's it has a bigger screen, a 7.9-inch screen versus I think it's 6.5 and 7.2 based on the model that you have. Uh, it's a 7.9-inch screen now, and the thickness of the console hasn't changed. That makes it just, it's just a bigger overall system, without adding too much bulk. I think that's really impactful. Like going back to my Switch 1 afterwards just felt like a massive downgrade. But yeah, I would say probably the mouse controls and how well they work. Because it's like you can see it and be like, oh yeah, like that probably works fine. But then when you play it, you're like, oh, this feels really good. It feels natural. Um, so yeah, I think that might be the most obvious takeaway I had. Jason Thompson says, was Mario Kart World as awesome to play as it looked? Also, did you get to play the new Donkey Kong Bonanza, and what did you think? So I did kind of cover this. I mean, I covered both of those pretty extensively in the last segment. But yes, Mario Kart World is absolutely my most anticipated game of the console as it exists now. And Donkey Kong Bonanza, is a lot of fun. But that, I think, of the big three that I played, Metroid, Mario Kart, and Donkey Kong, that's the one that I still feel has a little bit more to prove to me. I need to see how creative those developers can get. But yeah, I'm excited for all three of those games. Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, how were the loading times, and what game got you the most excited? So I just answered Mario Kart World is the game I'm most excited for, but Metroid Prime, I think, surprised me the most in terms of how much I loved it, because I like Metroid Prime, but I've never been like, oh my god, Metroid Prime is my favorite Nintendo franchise. I'm so happy it's coming back. It's always been one of those like, oh, I'll play that when it comes out. Now it's like whenever they announce the release date, it's going to be circled on my calendar. Um, Loading times. So a lot of the games, I mean, and all of this stuff is going to be kind of subject to change because these are all in development builds. And one of the last things that developers do when they finish a game before it goes gold is they optimize it, and that'll cut down the loading times. That said, I think the only time I really had any kind of load, I'm trying to think, I guess Civ 7 had a pretty substantial load, but even then the demoer said, yeah, we're still optimizing, so this is not indicative of the final performance. But then if you play Civ 7 on PC, as I have, it does take a long time to load there as well. So I don't think it's really a Switch problem as much as it's a Firaxis and 2K thing of like their game just takes a long time to load in. But other than that, I think everything loaded pretty fast. That was the only time that I was sitting there thinking like, man, this is taking a long time to load. So we'll have to see, when the final version comes out. Hector Ramirez says, how do you feel about the price increase on both physical and digital games? All right, so it's a tricky situation, right? Because $70 was a fairly recent price increase that we've gotten in the games industry, right? And I think we have resisted it, but we've all started to kind of accept that that is the kind of going to be the standard going forward. Um, you know, inflation has happened over the course of the decades that games were $60 as the standard for the longest time. And I think that 70, it was like, okay, yeah, that's still a pretty modest increase. $80 is that next step up, and that's a lot. But the reality of it, and I'm not trying to defend the fact that we're going to be paying more, and Nintendo has been extremely successful to the point like they don't need the games to be $80, I don't think. I mean, again, we'll probably learn a lot more on April 17th, and like maybe they'll show us the most mind-blowing features, or like the scope of this game is beyond anything they've done. And then it will all say, oh wow, okay, yeah, that is an $80 game, but it's going to take a lot to justify that. But realistically, if you look at the like the inflation that we've faced over the last few years, the current market, particularly with the newly introduced tariffs, that's going to increase our prices of everything, folks. Like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news if you haven't been paying attention, but whether you're buying a video game console or you're buying a new car, it is going to be more expensive if these tariffs go into place. And I think that this might be Nintendo hedging their bets a little bit in that regard. I've also seen some people say that because the Japanese yen is pretty weak right now, and it has been for the last several years, it might be it might be them trying to make it so that it is profitable. It's profitable to sell this software in Japan without making it so it's disproportionately more expensive in Japan than it is the rest of the world. I don't know if that is a confirmed report, or if that was just somebody kind of hypothesizing, but uh, it sucks. Don't make no mistake about it. I'm disappointed that Mario Kart World is going to be that expensive, and it seems like other games are also going to be that expensive. I think I saw that Tears of the Kingdom's like Nintendo Switch 2 version is $80, which it's not if you already own the Switch 1 version and you just pay the upgrade. But if you are buying Tears of the Kingdom for the first time for Nintendo Switch 2, I think it's going to be $80 as well. Um, I don't, I'm not going to defend that. And it sucks, but it also, I guess, makes sense, which is upsetting. I also think that if the economic situation was different, uh, the Switch 2 would maybe cost $400, but that's only speculation on my part. But yeah, the $80 sticker shock is a pretty rough one, isn't it? Let's go down to chain whipping. What happens if you plug in two chargers to the top and bottom of the Switch 2? Supercharged or super bricked? And I don't know because they didn't do a demonstration for us. I would imagine they've thought of that because Nintendo is very good about thinking about that. And I would bet that what it does is it deactivates one of the other. Like if you have two chargers, it probably has a safeguard to prevent overcharging the battery and screwing anything up. If they don't, that's a huge oversight on Nintendo's part. But Nintendo doesn't really do too many oversights, especially something that would brick a console. Wow, my voice is giving out. Turns out when you talk a lot by yourself, your voice starts caving. Um, I would imagine that it would just go off of one of them if you're charging it. Um, that said, I do know that the bottom USB-C port is the only one that outputs video. So I don't know if there's a way to charge it and then like connect something else, like an external video, something or other. But I would be surprised if it is something problematic if you do that. But I would also say maybe don't do that. That would probably be the better bet. Dusty Beeman has a few here. Are the Joy Cons more comfortable? 100%. I had a much better experience playing with the Joy Cons. I'm almost exclusively a Pro controller player on Switch One, unless I'm playing in handheld mode. I could see myself just playing with the Joy Cons, both sideways if I'm playing like a super or a Mario Party, Super Mario Party where it had the sideways Joy Cons, or some of the other games that use that. I would be much more willing to play those games now, but also just holding it so like I have like the detached Joy Cons. I could see myself playing that as well. Let's see. Did you get a chance to use the C button? Talk about it, please. I did not get to use the C button. I just got that extended demo of it. Um, it seems like it's pretty intuitive. I like that it works with all of the different software. You can broadcast in different ways, like whether you want to just have it voice chat, whether you want it to just be video of you, whether you just want it to be video of your game, whether you want to superimpose yourself over the game. That is really, really a nice touch. I'm excited to see how the voice works because they made it seem like if you're like sitting on your couch and your Switch 2 is on your TV stand, it will pick you up crystal clear. I'm excited to test that out. I did not get a chance to test out any of the chat functionality, but it again that extended demo did make it seem pretty pretty innovative in that world, even though it feels like Nintendo's playing catch up in that regard. Uh, Next one from Dusty Beeman. Did you get a chance to compare your launch model Switch with Switch 2 for any games? No, they did not have any Switch 1 titles there. Outside of the Switch 2 version. So like, Tears of the Kingdom. I can talk about how Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild and Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Super Mario Party Jamboree. I mean, they all looked and played way better. I mean, maybe not played way better, but they looked way better, and like the performance was way better. I would imagine it would be difficult for me to go back to playing Tears of the Kingdom in 30 FPS now. But yeah, I didn't get to play like Metroid Prime 4 on Switch 1 or anything like that. Or I haven't played the Switch 1 version of Civ 7, but the Switch 2 version looked and played really well, especially with the mouse controls. Um, and then do the Joy-Cons have any shelves adapters, things to slide them on as the Switch One did? I'm assuming you mean like the rail system. It does not appear that way. And I didn't talk about this yet, but like I did have a little bit of a learning curve, like trying to like snap it in. But the demo person who was there was like, oh yeah, like you can press the button to remove it, and then it's easier if you put the bottom in first and then snap it in that way. And but no, it doesn't seem as though there's any kind of rail adapter if you like that for your Switch. It seems like it is purely magnetic, which that is it seems better to me, having detached and reattached and played a few games in handheld mode. It does feel a lot sturdier. They also talked about Joy-Con drift being something that they wanted to address, and they really rebuilt the Switch and the Joy-Cons from the ground up. So much so that any Switch games that play on the Switch 2, from what I understand, is going to be emulated. It's not even like native, like backwards compatibility. It's emulation. So hopefully that means good emulation. I would imagine it's going to be, because they built the architecture of the Switch 1 and then they built the architecture of the Switch 2 presumably to be able to handle this. Um, so that really indicates how much of a ground up build this is. And then the final one for on Patreon was Andy Junkins saying the screen, did they use glass on the Switch 2? I really don't want to get a screen protector. I also hope the design of the dock won't scratch the edges like the Switch 1 dock. Yeah, I had that problem with my Switch 1 as well. I immediately put a screen protector on it. I didn't like tap the screen or anything like that, but that said, it didn't feel as soft as the Switch 1 screen did. But I probably would still get a screen protector if you're worried about it, especially since I'm always throwing it in my bag. I have a case for my Switch 1, but for my Switch 2, I'm always tossing it in my bag. I'm doing all kinds of stuff with my Switch. That's the nature of a portable game system, right? So that would be my recommendation. I also had a few from other places. Alf Mouse on Discord. How's the quality of the screen compared to the OLED? I don't think it's quite as bright as the OLED, but it still looked really, really good. Like it looked way better than my Switch One non OLED model. So, and also the bigger screen it's so hard to go back to that smaller screen after playing on the 7.9-inch LCD screen. Nintendo 101 on Discord. How's the weight? Um, it felt good. It was a little bit heavier than the Switch One launch model, or like the base Switch One, but that's to be expected, right? Because it's taller and wider than the Switch One was, so it's not as anywhere near as heavy as like my Steam Deck. And that would be absurd if it was. But yeah, I mean, I didn't get a perfect read on it, just because every handheld Switch that I had, I believe, had a chain on it. But even with like the tether, to prevent somebody from walking off with one, it didn't feel all that heavy. So I would say slightly heavier than the Switch One, but I'm not 100% on that. Three Sword Sama over on Discord. I really want to know if I can use my own camera and mouse. If so, that would be so epic. I would play Switch at my standing desk using a computer monitor anyway. Or okay, yeah. So he uses a standing desk for his computer monitor. Um, I don't think you can use your own mouse. I believe that some webcams are compatible. There was some talk of that during the developer roundtable, but then there was also like, oh well, some of these functionalities are not usable with certain cameras. So I don't know. You would have to read like the developer Q&A. I've not done that yet. I've only talked to some people about it. But from what I understand, some cameras are, but I do not believe any PC mouses are going to be usable on the Switch 2. Over on and also Three Sword Sama says, one thing I do know, Balatro is going to be dope in 4K 120 frames per second on Switch 2. Yes. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of upgrade, but Balatro is always dope. So no argument for me there. Uh, Over on Instagram, a pleasant waste of time says, I just need to know if they're going to fix, optimize, enhance, or do literally anything to make the last few Pokemon games better. I don't know specifically about Pokemon. I know Pokemon Legends ZA, they said there's a Switch 2 version that's going to have better resolution and frame rate. But as for past games, they did say that certain games will run better on Switch 2. They didn't name any games, but they said certain titles will have like improved load times and maybe more stable frame rates without having to purchase an upgrade. So maybe like something like Scarlet and Violet will have a better frame rate because it's a more powerful system, but they did not specifically say that. I hope so. It would be great to even just get like a stable 30 frames per second on Scarlet and Violet. That would make that experience so much better. Or even reducing pop in or stuff like that. I will say that also Tears of the Kingdom. I watched somebody jump off one of the Sky Islands, and the pop in was very minimal. I was impressed with the lack of pop in on Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition. And then down to the final email that I got. This is from Alan via email. They wrote, I'm curious to hear your take on the future of the Nintendo Switch Lite line. What would a Switch 2 Lite look like, assuming we ever got one? Or will Nintendo just drop it altogether? I'm assuming it would have non removable Joy-Cons, but what about the unit size? If the Switch 2 is larger than the OG Switch, will the Switch 2 Lite be about the same size as the OG Switch? Smaller, bigger? Don't mean to jump the gun here, especially well before the release of the Switch 2 base model, but as an owner of the OG Switch, I've always admired the Switch 2 Lite. After seeing the larger size of the Switch 2, I couldn't help but wonder about a Switch 2 Lite. I wonder if more folks will hold out for a smaller version. And then they also, I'll get to the other part of that question after I talk about that a little bit. So it's difficult, right? Because one of the key functionalities of the Switch 2 is the mouse functionality. If you get rid of removable Joy-Cons, you might not you might completely neuter that function, right? Like there's no way to use the mouse if you do that. And also, the better kickstand and everything, like I don't know if Nintendo will be as eager to do that. But then again, the Switch's primary gimmick was you can go on TV or you can go on the handheld mode, and they're like, oh, well, what if we just made it a handheld mode thing? I could see them doing a Switch 2 Lite. I don't know if it will mean non-removable Joy-Cons, just because now there's more functionality with the detached Joy-Con. Sorry, I'm stumbling over myself now. But yeah, I mean, I guess it would probably, if I had to guess, it would maybe be something more approximating the size of the original Switch, but that's just a complete guess at this point. I mean, remember the Switch Lite, I think, came out what, 2 years after the Switch One, so I mean, we're talking 2027 at that point. And then the Switch OLED came out in 2021, so that was 2 years after that. So that would be 2029 if that timeline follows. So we have a ways to go. So I mean, by then, I mean, again, the 3DS abandoned its primary gimmick for the 2DS. So I don't see any reason why, I guess, they down the line, like maybe a couple of years afterwards, they might release an option to not have to use, like, not just no mouse functionality, and then certain games just aren't playable in that way. Like, I mean, I think Super Mario Party was not playable on a Switch Lite because you had to have the detached Joy-Con. I could see that if there's like a game that requires a mouse. But I don't even think they're talking about that anytime soon. Um, and then Alan followed up with, any chance Nintendo will make an even lighter or smaller or more portable version of the original Switch Lite? I could see that happening. I mean, I think that they've done that in the past, where, like, I think it was like right around the time the Wii U launched, they put out that Wii Mini, and I don't know if they're going to keep iterating on the original Switch form factor, but if they're going to, I could see that, where it's just a smaller, more compact Switch. Like, as hardware becomes more advanced and the components are able to be made smaller and cheaper, that's something that Nintendo has traditionally done. They've made smaller versions, the mini versions of those consoles and handhelds. So I could see it happening. I don't think it's probable, but I don't think it's unlikely. I think it's kind of like it could happen, it could not, and Nintendo might be squarely focused on Switch 2, or maybe this holiday season they release a Switch Mini. But I also think with the naming convention, they might be concerned about confusing it a little too much, if that makes sense, because we've seen what happens when they have too many things that are too similar in name, whether it's the Wii and Wii U, or different, like 3DS, 2DS, 3DS XL, and new 3DS. There's a lot of confusion with those. We're seeing it right now with the Xbox Series X versus the Xbox One X. But yeah, I mean, I could see it, but I wouldn't. I would say that I would bet that I would say that the Switch 2 Lite is more probable than a Switch. It's like a Switch 1 Mini or something like that. But I think that's all the questions that I got that I'm able to answer. But thank you so much to everyone who wrote in. You were an excellent honorary guest for this very exciting episode of All Things Nintendo. And for everybody who didn't write in, I still appreciate you checking out the show. Be sure to subscribe, and also follow me on Blue Sky if you haven't already. I got rid of my Twitter account a few months ago, and I'm trying to build up my Blue Sky. And yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. As you know, my Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to participate in episodes such as this. But you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com, or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. And that is also the channel of my YouTube, and subscribing to that would help the show out a lot. That is our show for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before I wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons of the show: Abdullah, Adam Scott, Alex Stadnick, Ben Richland, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, Cody Gibson, Creeper 207, Mad Genie Confused Koala, Megan S., Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, and Zek 3 Swords Sama. Thank you so much for continuing to support All Things Nintendo.